Today, we're going to be covering the basics of comparative politics and political science. The main objectives are to explain the methods political scientists use to understand politics around the world, to discuss whether comparative politics can be more scientific and predict political outcomes, to define the role and importance of institutions in political life, and to compare freedom and equality and consider how politics reconciles the two across countries. Comparative politics is a study and comparison of domestic politics across countries. Comparative politics can be contrasted with another related field in political science, international relations. While comparative politics looks at the politics inside countries, we're talking elections, political parties, revolutions, and judicial systems, international relations concentrates on the relations between countries. This is the case for foreign policy, war, trade, and foreign aid. Throughout this presentation, we will be looking at the structures of political science and comparative politics, which fall under three main categories: analytical concepts, which are assumptions and theories that guide our research; methods, which are ways to study and test those theories; and ideals, which are beliefs and values about preferred outcomes. Analytical concepts helps us ask questions about cause and effect. Methods provide tools to seek out explanations, and ideals help us compare existing politics with what we might prefer. When addressing politics, we have to consider and analyze how power is used either by members of society or institutions. Again, it is really important to understand that institutions are organizations or activities that are self-perpetuating and valid for their own sake. Institutions play an important role in defining and shaping what is possible and probable in political life by laying out the rules, norms, and structures in which we live. Regardless of space and time, institutions have always helped us organize our reality. Here are some different institutions. We have the economy, language, family, media, the government, and religion. There are formal institutions that are based on officially sanctioned rules that are relatively clear, such as laws and the economy. Yet there are also informal institutions. These are unwritten and unofficial, but no less powerful. These are the cases for gender or morality. Politics is a struggle in any group for power that will give one or more persons the ability to make decisions for the larger group. Again, politics is always about power. The group may range from a small organization to the entire world. Political scientists, in particular, concentrate on the struggle for leadership and power in a political community, such as the case for a political party, an elected office, a city, a region, or a country. Power is the ability to influence others or impose one's will on them. From power arises master-slave dialectics, where one person is always going to be dominant over another. This is the case for individuals, institutions, or even countries. Here are some major thinkers in political science. We have Aristotle. Again, he's one of the founders of politics, of the idea of politics, and he's going to be talking about how politics play a practical purpose in the development of a city-state. Niccolo Machiavelli, he is the father of political science. He is often cited as the first modern political scientist due to his emphasis on statecraft and empirical knowledge. We know him from The Prince. Thomas Hobbes is another famous political scientist. We know him from the development of a social contract, where the Leviathan is the symbol for a powerful state that controls society. John Locke is also going to be important. He argued that private property was above everything else, and we needed that private property along with individual freedoms and liberties in order to organize a government. Again, he's also a social contract theorist. Baron de Montesquieu, he studied government systems. He advocated for the separation of powers within government. We have the beginnings of a system of checks and balances. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is also a social contract theorist. We have the idea of a general will, a constitution that is adopted by the citizens to encompass their rights. Karl Marx, very famous with his book Das Kapital, which predicted the eventual collapse of capitalism and the major gap between the rich and the poor. Max Weber, a more contemporary philosopher, wrote about the topics of bureaucracy, how the Protestant ethics shaped the economy, and developed a book called Economy and Society, as well as the Protestant ethic. The methodology at hand is the comparative method. This is a way to compare cases and draw conclusions. The method of comparing countries can help us make arguments about cause and effect by drawing evidence from across space and time. Methodology is incredibly important when doing any kind of research, since it helps us guide ourselves through that research. There are two main methods that we're going to be applying to political science. Some comparative scientists rely on qualitative methods, which is basically evidence and methodology, such as interviews and observations. And we try to document the research in those forms. It's more based on the qualities of a given aspect and how people interact with people rather than physical hardcore data. On the other hand, we have quantitative research, which favors a wider use of cases unbound by area specialization, which means we have a greater use of statistical analysis and mathematical models, which often draw from economics. We're going to be using a lot of statistical inferences, and we're likely going to be using deductive reasoning to begin with theorizing what is political within that array of data. Regardless of methodology, we might apply either inductive or deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is a means by which we go from studying a case to generating a hypothesis. Examining one country closely may lead us to form a hypothesis about why a country operates the way it does. In this case, we have an observation. From that observation, we're going to be looking for patterns, just like Sherlock Holmes. We're going to be formulating a hypothesis from those patterns, and we might come up with a theory. Here's a simple example. Element A is a metal and expanded when heated. Element B is also a metal and expanded when heated. The conclusion is that all metals expand when they are heated, again because we have the observation and the patterns between element A and element B. Deductive reasoning, on the other hand, is starting with a problem and from there generating some hypotheses about cause and effect to test against a number of cases. In deductive reasoning, we would start with a hypothesis about nationalism, for example, and then test that hypothesis by looking at a number of countries. In this case, we're going to be beginning with a theory and then developing a hypothesis, then looking and observing different cases and finding a confirmation for that hypothesis. Again, the example of the metals. All metals expand when they are heated. That's our theory. Element A expanded when heated. Conclusion, element A is a metal. However, we might have a flaw here. Note that element A might not exactly be a metal, but expands nevertheless. So the conclusion might be flawed. Because we're looking for those specific elements that expand, we might conclude that that element is a metal when it is actually not. By carrying out such studies, we might find a correlation or apparent association between certain factors or variables. If we were particularly ambitious, we might claim to have found cause and effect, or a causal relationship. However, there might be some issues with conducting research, especially in trying to find correlations or causations. First, political scientists have difficulty controlling the variables in the cases they study, since they are incredibly complex. A second related problem concerns the interactions between the variables themselves. Even if we can control our variables in making our comparisons, there is a problem that many of these variables are interconnected and interact. Similar variables might interact to produce particular outcomes in a multi-causality. A third problem involves the limits to our information gathering. Case studies are therefore essential for narrowing down the research. A fourth problem in comparative politics concerns how we access the few cases we do, which includes transparency, funding, time, and accuracy. Fifth, even when comparatives do widen the range of cases, their focus tends to be limited to a single geographic region, and often these area studies directly revolve around the West due to accessibility of information. Six, the problem of bias makes it even harder to control for variables and to select the right cases. This is the case for selection bias, which might occur, meaning that we are relying heavily on deductive reasoning and pinpointing evidence. So again, this is what happens when we choose an element and we see it expand and we don't really know if it's a metal or not. But because we see it expand and it follows our hypotheses, we conclude that it is. That's selection bias. Finally, the last concern deals with the heart of political science, the search for cause and effect. The problem of distinguishing between cause and effect is known as endogeneity, and it's a major obstacle in comparative research. We don't know if the cause is one and the effect is the other, or vice versa. And we usually just assume that one is over the other. There are two basic trends in comparative politics. The traditional approach emphasizes descriptions of political systems and their institutions. The behavioral approach, on the other hand, marks a shift from a descriptive study of politics to one that emphasizes causality, explanation, and prediction. It emphasizes the political behavior of individuals more than larger political structures and quantitative more than qualitative methodology. And basically, modernization theory predominates within the behavioral revolution. These trends help solidify guiding political theories. The first one is modernization theory. The second one is rational choice, as we have below. A theory is an integrated set of hypotheses, assumptions, and facts. The first, modernization theory, holds that as the societies developed, they would become capitalist democracies converging around a set of shared values and characteristics. This path of modernization helps to define developed, developing, and communist states. The second is rational choice or game theory, to study the rules and games by which politics is played and how human beings act on their preferences, like voting, choosing a party, or supporting the revolution. The theory asserts that the emphasis on individual rationality discounts the importance of things like historical complexity, unintended outcomes, or cultural factors. We're looking at how people act and how people rationalize the world around them. This is how people make meaning of what's happening around them. This theory usually serves to explain more contemporary phenomena because it comes with the values of postmodernism as well. So again, it's all about identifying how individuals ration their reality. Politics is bound up in the struggle between individual freedom and collective equality, and in how these ideals are to be reconciled. Freedom is an individual's ability to act independently without fear of restriction or punishment by the state or other individuals or groups in society. Freedom connotes autonomy. It encompasses such concepts as free speech, free assembly, freedom of religion, and other civil liberties. Equality, on the other hand, refers to a material standard of living shared by individuals within a community, society, or country. The relation between equality and freedom is typically viewed in terms of justice and injustice, a measurement of whether our ideals have been met. If our ideals have not been met, then therefore it's an unjust society. In short, politics is driven by the ideal of reconciling individual freedom and collective equality. There's a big emphasis on the contrast between individuals and collectives because usually as a collective, we restrict individual freedom. Thank you so much. This is our bibliography. Thank you to Patrick O'Neill and his fabulous book. And we recognize the authors of all media content in this presentation.